Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Weyland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show.
Hello and welcome to How to Be a Better DM. This is your host, Tanner Weyland, and I'm here with Cayden Ottley. Say hi,
How's
Cayden.
it going? Hey.
So you guys might remember Cayden. He's been on the podcast here or there. He's kind of like he's the power behind the throne, as I like to think of it. He makes our days bright. And did I miss anything, Cayden?
Wow. I mean, I don't know if I deserved that much, but I'll take it.
Yeah, well, we're just happy to have you. Justin, we wanted to have Cayden on with all three of us, but Justin actually had a family event that he was traveling for. So, it's just us two pals, us two buddies out in the, lone dark of the world.
That's right.
Just learn about how to be better DMs. And first things first, how's it going? Have you been nerding out about anything recently?
Well, I just went to a book signing with Christopher Paolini because he just released his book, Murtagh.
Oh, snap, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was fun. It was fun to meet him and get back into the world of Alagasia. And yeah, I mean, I'm always nerding out about something, whether it's, running D&D campaigns or reading books. So what about you?
It's so funny you bring that up. I was listening to a podcast yesterday from this podcast called Wizard and the Bruiser. And they were talking about Aragon and essentially the fandom and everything. In case any of you don't remember or know, Christopher Paolini was the author of the Aragon or Inheritance series of books. And it was huge when I was young, right? I ate those books up. And aside from Harry Potter, that was probably one of the book series that I was waiting on bated breath for the next one to come out.
Totally.
And so, yeah, that's really cool that you got to do that. I just, I love that. And I hear they're even trying to make right what was done wrong in the past by doing a TV show of the series. So we'll see if that happens.
I know. I'm a little bit worried about that one. Just because they just released the Percy Jackson. And I don't know, listeners, you might feel differently, but even though, is it Rick Riordan? Yeah, Rick Riordan. Yes. Even though he was pretty involved, I didn't feel like it was that true to the books, and I was a little disappointed, but
I know. And you see a lot of those, right? Where it's the Wheel of Time, as good as it is, it was, you got mixed reviews for the show.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think that there's a few exceptions to it, but for the most part, it's hard to stay true to the vision, or at least capture that kind of magic of the books in TV. So keep our fingers crossed. And speaking of dragons, why not talk about some dungeons too?
Good segue.
Yeah, that's what I try and do. So today we're going to talk about a topic that Cayden actually kind of presented, and I thought it was a great idea. Basically, how do we reconcile the difference between experience and knowledge in D&D characters? So when you pitched this idea, Cayden, what did you have in mind specifically?
Sure. So I saw a Facebook post, and it was a picture of a chair. And the chair, I mean, it's two chairs, I guess, one on the left and one on the right. And the one on the left is, an assembled, glued up, individual pieces of wood that they've glued into a stack, basically, to make this chair. And it says knowledge above it. And then the one on the right has a picture of this same chair that has now been carved beautifully into some tree patterns and floral patterns, and it says experience over the top. And and
it's a really cool image, by the way, viewers, because it's like you see the before and after, but it's like essentially it's the same stuff, like all the same woods there, but one's carved beautifully and the other one's very raw, and it's really cool.
Yeah, and I thought it was an interesting thing in D&D. I started a new campaign with my family, actually. And, we've been going for maybe a couple of months now, and they have level 1 characters. And we've tried this before. We've tried doing a D&D campaign. And so they had some prior knowledge that they were bringing to the table themselves. And I had to explain to them, hey, even though you may know these things, or you may want your character to know these things, I was like, they're level 1 characters. They are, this is their first time adventuring. So they really don't have that experience that maybe your level 3 or level 4 characters had before.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's interesting how every character starts out, well, unless you're hopping halfway in and they're already a certain amount of leveled up. Most characters do start really low, though. And at the same time, you're like, hey, this level 1 character used to be the captain of a ship that sank, and and it's this kind of thing where you paint this amazing backstory of essentially them being almost hero-like, even before they're at their level 1 level, right? And so you kind of wonder, you're like, okay, how do I treat this person as someone who's really experienced, who has a lot of ability, and yet they've got 0 capabilities in terms of roles, right?
Yep.
And in terms of spells and everything else. So I think that's kind of fascinating, because I've seen it kind of pushed as a DM a couple times, right? I've had a couple players who have played, the classic, my person is a thief with a lot of experience, and certainly they're better than the other players in terms of stealth and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. But
you can't necessarily expect, even if they try and be like, oh, I probably know everyone in town. It's like, well, you're also a level 1 player, a character. So maybe they don't know everyone in town. Maybe, they were actually, maybe we need to tone down their backstory to be more realistic to a level 1 character, right? It's
Sure.
like, maybe they were a really good common street criminal,
Yeah.
And so in your experience, how do you validate the wonderful backstories that the players have written, while also being like, hey, act your level, essentially?
Sure. So I think in the past, I will level up the DC. I kind of, I'm like, okay,
yes.
If we go back to the example of a thief, and, they've definitely had some experience with petty theft, and, maybe they were exiled from somewhere because they got caught thieving.
Yep.
And that's, a main component of their backstory. It's like, okay, they were prominent enough and maybe, I don't know, for whatever reason they were let off or they escaped. If they're coming into a new situation where they are like, hey, I'm proficient in this, which they may actually be proficient in it, and they have, a fairly good modifier, then, well, just level up the DC to maybe something that would be more realistic. If 10 used to be easy, then, you can boost it up to maybe a 15, make it just a little bit more unattainable for them. So that just in the case that they don't roll as well as they thought they were going to, it still reflects their experience level.
Yeah, exactly. I think that keeping, some of those things in mind, especially in terms of early knowledge checks, I think that's really important because, like you were saying, if a character is like, oh my goodness, my guy's like the most religious priest you've ever seen, right? But he's still level 2. It's like, well, unless he's put a lot of levels into, a lot of points into specifically, his religion role, then what can he do? It's like maybe he gets a really good role, but also he shouldn't be able to find out that there's an evil god who's running all of these things just because he rolled a pretty good roll at the start, right? It's like you got to keep the DC in mind and not just let a player kind of, just because they wrote a really good backstory, trample over all these growth opportunities they have to have in the future. But it almost makes me wonder, and we'll get to this in a sec, but it almost makes me wonder how you can actually show that growth from knowledge to experience throughout the campaign. But like I said, before we get into that, let's talk about our sponsor for this episode, which is Magic Mind. Magic Mind, we've been talking about it for a sec now, but we just can't get enough of them. Essentially, they're energizing, healthy shots that really help you out in terms of, it helps you get the vitamins that you need. It helps you get, the various different, it's got nootropics in it. It's got everything. It's got mushrooms. It's got greens. And what I love about it is I've tried some of the energy drinks, in the morning at the office. They've got a whole fridge of them. And it really just leaves me feeling gross. It leaves me feeling like I'm unhealthy. And I mean, frankly, I am, because I'm just, chugging that down and hoping that the caffeine gets me through the day. But it's got all kinds of natural ingredients and supplements that helps you feel more energized and more alert. And here's the best part. It's a lot easier for everyone here that's listening to the podcast to access. Because if you have a Sprouts farmer's market near you, they've actually started stocking them in the stores themselves. But once you try that, you also get it online. If you go to magicmind.com/betterdm and use our code betterdm20, you actually can get up to 50% off of your subscription, which is a great way to kind of get that incorporated into your daily routine. Because for me, some days I'm not feeling fully up to doing everything I need to. And it's just that extra help that it really does a lot for me. Can't recommend it enough. But let's get back to it. That question that I was kind of posing, which is like, okay, if we want to make sure that our early level players or characters seem like they aren't super experienced, how do you show that progress from, to a more experienced level as they level up? Oh, what do you think?
Yeah. So I think that it's super important there to, as the DM, make sure that you're not putting your characters in places where they, may be forced into trying something that is way out of their league. Level 1 characters aren't going to be associating with gods or trying to create or do the heist of the century,
Yes. Yeah, and I think also on top of that, you need to spend time each time that they level up talking to each player and like within the circle being like, okay, you leveled up. What does that look like? Does that mean that, like, what do you think has helped him level up? And also, like, sometimes a lot, I try personally to do a lot of leveling up after they've overcome a big challenge, right? They beat a big mid boss or something, right? And then they go back to their base, to their town, and kind of they're just chilling for a bit. That's a great time to be like, okay, you leveled up. What does that look like? And then have them, maybe explain through a montage or something about like, okay, my wizard, he goes to the library every day, this wizard, and he's studying, and you just see a scene of him surrounded by books that slowly grow, and kind of show that, like, hey, they're not just leveling up because they killed a certain amount of people, because in the real world that's not how it works, right? They level up because they got experience either along the journey beforehand, or because they leveled up and there was some stuff in the background that maybe you weren't aware of. And it's really, I think it's a great storytelling moment when you can acknowledge that and let the players kind of share, like, hey, this is how my level 1 wizard got to level 2, level 3, level 4, and it's going to look a little bit different each time.
Yeah. And maybe a little bit of a side note there is it might be, or it is really important to talk to your players and find out what the goal of this character is that they're playing, because because as they're going, you want to make sure that you're continuing to put obstacles in their path that give them experience in the places they want to be experienced.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, because it's like, if you ask them their goal, then it's like you're going to find out a lot about what that kind of player in pictures their character doing to improve. Because I heard this one live play where a player described it so beautifully, of their fighter essentially just practicing, and they explain like, oh, they like watching where they stepped and kind of going through like the footwork and like slowly shuffling back and forth, just practicing. And so when a character is described in that way, and not just when they're like in the moment leveling up, then it's no surprise that they're getting better, right?
Yeah.
And like you were saying, if you present certain challenges that coincide with what the player pictures that character's growth arc will be, then it's like, oh my goodness, this warlock didn't just get better out of nowhere. They got better because, maybe that pact that they made, like they've done some stuff there. There's been some development, or because they've kind of given into certain, a certain part of their personality, whatever it is. If you pair that along the way, then leveling up isn't as simple as like, oh, add +1 to whatever the number was. It's like, no, it's like, hey, this was a natural progression because we've been showing their build up, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I like to look at it like, as DMs, we are in charge of writing the story, and I guess writing kind of the premise of the story, letting the story play out, and then kind of editing it along the way. And we're writing this epic fantasy book, and so it really is like that. I love the little moments can't be glanced over; they need to be there.
Yeah, and I like what you've been sharing about, like, hey, the types of challenges that you throw at the players can be these catalysts for explaining the growth. But I also think it's an equally important part for you to, when you're checking in with the characters, and when you're also like, when there's downtime within an adventure, whether it's at a town or just at the fireplace, after when they're going down for a long rest. I just kind of wonder, I'm like, what can we do there to really encourage, this showing of practice as a feature, right? Or like to get the players to reflect on the experiences the characters have gone through from a growth perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I know. I'm trying to think of how you could incentivize that.
Like I think obviously there's a thing like inspiration, right? You can do that for great options. I also think that you could, when you're checking in with the characters as they sit around the campfire, that, usually you ask like, hey, how are they doing? How'd they deal with, this loss that happened? Or, they almost died. How are they dealing with that? Maybe you could get a bit more specific. And once you find out like, oh, how are they doing generally? Be like, okay, do they practice anything at night? Do they study anything? Kind of give players those prompts so that it kind of becomes part of their
nightly routine.
Yes, exactly. Part of their nightly routine, and also part of how they think about their characters in the terms of like, oh, how can they improve? And also even like with shopping, because a lot of times when you are in the downtime period, if they're in town, they're going to do shopping, and oftentimes it's for, new armor, new anything, right?
Yeah.
And that can be as simple as like, just like, okay, mark the gold off your sheet. You got what you wanted. Or you could be like, why are they looking for this? Oh, because the old armor they had like has punctures in it because they almost died and they want to get better. Just how you frame what they naturally want to do can help them also reframe it as growth.
Totally. Yeah. And I guess you could also utilize NPCs in that way.
Yes.
You can have them kind of set the tone that you're looking for around the campfire. I'll definitely do that because, different players I've had in the past have a hard time, getting vulnerable almost.
Yep.
We're having that downtime role play around the fire. In real life, we'd be talking about our stories. We'd be talking about some hardships we've had, but in D&D, everyone wants to skip over that, but it's super, super important for the development and experience building. So having an NPC that can jump in there and start that conversation, can sometimes warm them up to those things.
Absolutely. And that kind of made me like think of an interesting thing too, which is that even when they're going out and they're like shopping or they're interacting with NPCs who can give them something, like have the NPC act as if the character is kind of from a lowly place, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like being like, okay, so you're at the armor and they see that you've got this really weak, starter armor.
Yeah. Level 1 armor.
Yeah, exactly. Or, you just have the most basic longbow or something. And having, you come in, feeling flush with cash and being like, oh, I just finished this last stretch of my adventure. A lot of times you could play that NPC like being like, oh, I wonder if I have that item you want. Or you could be like, ooh, I don't know if you can handle this item. It's not for kids,
Sure.
And kind of like, you're almost rizzing them a little bit, but not for the purpose of just being difficult, but for the purpose of being like, hey, you are a beginner. And this is you really trying to level up. And even, I think you could do that even with leveling up, right? If you're talking with your players between sessions and being like, okay, you just leveled up. What kind of direction are you thinking of taking your character? Let's say that they try to multi-class. That's a perfect example of being like, okay, they multi-classed. They can't do that out of nowhere. When you're talking in between, sessions, be like, okay, when I come back, I want, we're going to try and play out how that happened.
Sure.
Yeah.
I love that. The idea of NPCs in the marketplace treating the players as they are. I for some reason, never really thought about that, but I have had campaigns in the past where, me as a player, suddenly it seems we've, vanquished one foe and all of a sudden everybody knows our name no matter where we're going.
Yep.
And it gets to your head, you start You start walking into places and you become that group that just thinks they can beat anybody and will immediately, shoot a lightning bolt the second somebody talks back to you. So it could be good for overall story development just to be humbled a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of, I think at the heart of this whole discussion, it's been like experience versus knowledge, because it's all about scale. So Kirsty and I, we have a dog. He's like 9 months old now, but
Okay.
For the past half a year, we've been just trying to get this little kid, this little banjo over here, to just, learn things. And sometimes he does really well, like better than we expect. Other times, and we've talked with a dog trainer and they've really helped us out, but they're like, hey, make sure it's at their grade level, right? Like,
Yeah.
Because he's not in school, obviously, but the idea is like, hey, they have different levels that it should be expected that they can do certain things. And
Sure.
And with players, that's absolutely the case. When they're level 1, they shouldn't be fighting the evil overlord. They should be fighting bandits on the side of the road, or even warthogs that they find in the forest. And also the type of knowledge, that they're rolling for like skill checks and everything. They shouldn't be doing that, for like ancient lore or anything. It should be kind of a little bit more basic. And then you get a chance to kind of delve into that stuff as they level up, just keep it in their grade level and then show how they kind of boost their grade level along the journey. And then everything will feel a lot more earned.
Yeah. Keep some surprises and gifts for later so that the story is just as rewarding in 3 years as it was on the first month.
Exactly. Right. And I know that, I'll say this, like you were saying, players feel like, hey, we solved this town's dilemma of the drinking water being poisoned by like an ooze. We're kind of the big heroes around here. And it's like, well, maybe we need to reframe it and be like, yeah, you're one of multiple do-gooders that the town has maybe experienced, and maybe a couple families are grateful for you, but don't go walking into the store being like, I demand your finest wine, in celebration or anything, right?
Yep.
Well, Cayden, any final thoughts on, how DMs can implement this, or, any thoughts on this topic in general?
No, I thought you had a great summary, just barely, so I feel content.
Perfect. And that's the goal, DMs. It's to feel content with how we're running the game. And so we hope that this discussion's been helpful. Cayden, thanks again for coming on.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Well, and for all the rest of you, go out, make sure to make that growth experience feel real, feel earned. And until next time, let's roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
and Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.